Ever feel like everything's getting more expensive? Groceries, rent, even breathing. And let's not forget car insurance. It just keeps creeping up. But here's the thing. Insurify makes one part of life easier. It's an insurance comparison site that finds real-time quotes from dozens of top insurers. Insurance companies compete for your business, driving down prices. It's like having a friend who knows all the best deals, but without the smug grin. You could save as much as $1,025 a year, and you might even cut your bill in half. The best part, it's all online. No phone calls, no spam, no nonsense. You can be covered in as little as 10 minutes, and with an excellent star rating on Trustpilot, saving feels less impossible. So why not give it a shot? Visit Insurify.com and see how much you can save. That's INSURIFY.com. Average potential savings based on initial quotes received by 183,234 customers seeking insurance through Insurify. Actual savings may vary depending on state of residence, individual circumstances, coverage selections, and insurance provider. Savings results are not guaranteed. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allbirds or Skims, sure, they have a fantastic product, and yes, they have brilliant marketing as well, but an often overlooked secret to it all is the business behind the business, making selling simple, and for millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Allbirds and Mattel uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/theathletic, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/theathletic to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/theathletic.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The Athletic.
For the first time since 2014, Marc Marquez has won the MotoGP season opener. How did 2014 go again? Oh yeah, Marquez won basically everything from then onwards. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast, the Thai Grand Prix episode. I'm Matt Beer. Simon Patterson is coming to us from Thailand in the media centre still. Val Khorounzhiy is grinding his way through his first go at rider rankings, probably with one hand while we're doing this podcast recording, because he's taken over that gig from Simon this year. Simon looks pretty fresh. Val looks unfresh. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm surprisingly fresh, considering it was hotter than the surface of the sun today. In this place. Somehow it got windier today, and that made it hotter, not colder.
Yeah.
It's just, when the riders complain about the temperature this weekend, and this is something we're going to cover.
Definitely.
They were right. They were right.
Yeah, I was very impressed how awake and alert and happy you were looking, considering you last saw you home on like Boxing Day or something, and it's been
27th of January.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, but I have just got a message saying you can now check in for your flight, so that's part of the reason why I'm quite perky.
I mean, he is basically the up in the air George Clooney character, so that's not that deep cut of reference. That movie was nominated for an Oscar, so
flew past me.
People should be aware.
Over my head. Anyway, MotoGP. So Marc Marquez dominated the weekend, but it was more than that. The Marquez family dominated the weekend at Buriram, and did it in quite an attention-grabbing way in the end. Just as we were thinking the Grand Prix would be another Marc-led procession like the sprint had been, suddenly he slows, very obviously handing Alex the lead. Now, we all straight away in our work chat were like, that's a tyre pressure ploy, isn't it? And then Val, towards the end of the race, you were starting to go, actually, is he genuinely handing this to Alex? Because it didn't necessarily look like the swap back was going to come. It was a tyre pressure ploy. He did hand the lead back. It was a little bit more complicated than it might have looked at first glance, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, silly of me to suggest that even for a second, I guess, but it probably was my unfresh mind jumping to the wrong conclusions.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It was like, as I said, it was both complicated and easy. Easy in the sense that Marc had the race so much under control that he could spend more than half of it in basically extremely suboptimal circumstances of just having a bike right in front of him, creating absolutely no clean air, because generally speaking, riders in conditions like today, at a track like today, did not want to be running at that kind of gap. Even if they were running behind somebody, you don't want to shadow somebody for like a good 13 laps at like 2-3 tenths behind, 1 tenth behind. Just modern MotoGP riders don't like to do that. They generally don't do that. For Marc, it was clearly no problem at all. He coped very well with it. He had so much in reserve. He was, as he said, rolling off on the straights a little bit, accelerating as smoothly as possible to make sure he wasn't actually too close to Alex in the braking points, so that he could hammer the brake hard, so that he could keep the front tire pressure up through just putting all the temperature into it. It is interesting that they ended up in that situation, in the tire pressure situation, because it was the only reason not to believe it in the race, and the sort of we were getting quite frustrated at how obvious it potentially was, but the only reason not to believe it was Ducati doesn't feel like a mistake they would make necessarily, right, on the crew side, because everybody and their mother knew Marc would lead that whole race from start to finish, generally speaking. That was supposed to be the race scenario, so that should have been the race scenario they prepared the starting pressures from. Marc actually had a really good explanation for that, or at least a really, like, I don't know that it completely answers all of my questions, but it's, it gets you quite far. He said that the way he approaches races is still not entirely familiar to the Ducati side of the garage, led by Marco Rigamonti, that he's now in, because obviously he's changed crew and crew chief in the off season, and that the way he rides in races, sometimes he modifies his riding style while running similar pace, that he wasn't putting the brake pressure into the front that maybe previous weekend data would have suggested he would be, but still able to run super fast pace. Just riding basically as fast, but more conservative, so stressing the front less, so not in the front tire range. And because, sort of the Rigamonti side wouldn't have expected that so much, suddenly he's ended up in a complicated situation where he's had to improvise and get creative at how to get the tire in range. Because obviously, as fast as he was, I don't think he was winning by would have required 18 seconds today or something like that. I don't think that was happening, 16, 18 seconds. But honestly, it would have been a fair few seconds if you wanted to make it. The final 3 laps showed that.
It would have been, he would have won by a considerable margin and would have led start to finish if he had been able to take Frankie Carcetti with him as crew chief from Gresini to the factory team this year. I'm pretty sure. Because Frankie would have understood that, Carcetti would have understood a little bit more how Marc rides in races, and I think that is absolutely it. It's maybe a little bit of not quite understanding how he is and what he does at the minute, because, we've got 15 years of empirical data from other riders in the same factory as him being completely confounded by what Marc Marquez's data looks like. We know that he does things in a motorbike that's not really normal. So, I think, the explanation makes loads and loads of sense to me.
Yeah, because last year, the Marc Carcetti first year combination, they also got caught out a bit at Assen, didn't they? And got the penalty.
Yeah.
But in that case, Marc wasn't fast enough to just ignore that, basically. This weekend, he was fast enough to completely alter the whole picture of his race in just a click and be sat in the bike doing maths.
And multiple other people's races.
We'll get to this in a second, right? But it's quite the statement, unintentionally so. It was going to be just a normal win by 2 seconds otherwise. Instead, it was unintentionally like, you guys might be in trouble. I didn't mean to reveal this, but I had to. Oops.
My desk mate in the media centre this weekend has been Matt Oxley, and he compared it immediately after the race to that race in Phillip Island in 2015, where he was just playing with everyone and then disappeared with 3 laps to go. Because that is essentially it. He was having fun and playing with people and stringing them all along. And imagine the absolute frustration that anyone would feel in that situation, but especially Alex when it's your big brother that did that to you.
I should mention actually that we've been inviting the Race Members Club to make their own Larry predictions in the community on Patreon, because we are prone to those as well. And both Eric, Yip, and Greg predicted that Alex will take Marc out at some point this season. And opening lap, I did wonder a little bit, because Alex was putting some good moves towards Marc. And then when Marc wasn't quite getting back past Alex, I mean, it did look like he was actually trying a few times unsuccessfully. Their prediction kind of came back to mind then. So I'm not going to take that one off the table yet, as something that won't happen at some point this season.
I'll go as far as to say, I don't know if they'll take each other out, but there'll be contact.
No, it's quite plausible.
There will be contact between them.
Yeah. Our big boss, Glenn, messaged me to remind me that I'd predicted there'd be a Marquez Brothers 1-2 at some point during the season. That came true quickly. And
that aged well.
Yeah. I described it as well as how like endearing it would be to see that happen, but it had no chance to be endearing, because it was so obviously going to happen all weekend that by the time it happened, it wasn't like, oh, phew, they've done it. It was like, oh yeah, obviously this was going to happen from basically the moment they hit the track on Friday morning.
I don't know. I wasn't convinced that Alex's pace was going to do the full 26 on Sunday.
Yeah.
I wasn't too sure. I thought Bagnaia would have more in the final stage of the race, and I think the fact that he didn't should alarm him a little bit, because normally part of it is clearly that Alex is so much more comfortable on this GP24 that's light years ahead of what he and Marc were using last year. But that's part of it. The other part is still, I think Bagnaia just wasn't super comfortable.
I mean, in Fabio Di Giannantonio's scrum, as for the first time, we can let you hear it yourselves. But he was like basically, extolling the virtues of the GP24. I keep saying 24.5 because it's technically a 25, but it's a GP24 he's riding compared to the GP23, and just how much better it actually is this year.
How much better is this bike you're riding this year compared to last year?
When you write the article, make my face like this. Way better. Last year I was talking with some colleagues. They were saying, no, 23-24 is the same bike, just something new, but it's like another world completely. Much faster. The power is insane. The traction is unbelievable. The turning of the bike is really, I think is not 1 second difference, but on the race distance could be.
I'm glad we can include these clips now, because us saying that mouth noise would probably not be great audio compared to like how Didier did it himself, and it certainly can't be typed well. So this is the advantage of having a podcast as well as a website. Let's just clarify actually, because Greg and the Members Club did ask what the actual Ducati bike specs were this weekend, and that's been something that has jumped all over the place a little bit during testing. So who has got what from 24/potentially 25? Or are they all, Greg says, are they all a 24.9, or is there a 24.9 and 24.0? What is the situation?
There's 3 24.9s. That's Val's shaking his head because he.
I don't call it that. I'm not on board with this rebranding.
That's why you're shaking.
24.9 with no new. Yeah.
Okay, so there's 3 of what I'm going to call the GP 24.9s, which are basically, as far as we can establish, the end of season bike from last year with a few new things, but not that many new things. I've asked Pecco Bagnaia on like Friday, and he said mainly swing arm.
Okay.
That's the big thing that's changed. But apart from that, it's essentially the bike he finished the season on. They're going to try some new bits later in the year, probably the Jerez post-race test on Monday. They're going to try the actual GP25 frame again, because that's not homologated. And there'll be some aero updates as they're allowed to do by the rules. But that's essentially the bike that Bagnaia, Marc Marquez and Di Giannantonio have. Then there's the GP 24.5 that Morbidelli, Firmin Aldeguer and Alex Marquez have, which is the spec of GP24 that Bagnaia had last year when we came back from the summer break at the Austrian Grand Prix.
So no one is on a 24.0.
No one's on a 24.0, which is a big difference from last year. That's a big step forward from last year, because obviously we saw... Remember the GP23 update come in the middle of the season and then get taken away again whenever it blew up an engine rather spectacularly in Lombok. So we've not seen that this year. The 3 guys on the older bike are on a much newer older bike than they were on an older bike last year. So hopefully that makes sense. And while Val might roll his eyes, I can't think of a better way to explain this than like GP 24.5 and GP 24.9.
I like it. I feel now like we need a GP 21 being run by a Vintia as well, just to like go a bit old school. complete the set.
I actually take it back, because I think GP 24.9 to me implied that it's really close to 25, which isn't true. But if we just take it as a late version of the 24, then actually
exactly.
That's fine.
Yeah. I'm using like the software term where it's rather than it being like 9/10 of the way to a 25.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That seems fair and just about understandable as well. We are going to talk about the scale of Marc Marquez's domination, but I think we have to do it in reverse by talking about the person who everyone would have thought would be his biggest rival, which was Pecco Bagnaia. Seppi Zimmer phrased it. Do you think Pecco and others will actually have battles with Marc, or will it be a season of Marc taking off well into first place and having a battle for second playing out behind him? Simon, is this a portent for the season to come? That's actually Oscar Robledo's phrasing, or is this just an anomaly as far as Bagnaia is concerned? And what was it this weekend that made him a fair bit behind Marc just from the moment he turned up? Yeah,
I mean, we're going to see this for the next 2 or 3 races. Same thing's going to happen in Argentina, I'm pretty sure. Although I'm hoping for a spoiler that we'll come to later that doesn't involve Ducatis.
Yes.
And like, we're obviously going to see this in Coda. There's nothing else that's going to happen. Like, you're going to see this in Coda. And Seppi, I hope you're coming to Coda again, because we're going to do a Meet the Race podcast. We're going to do a catch up. So, and Seppi came last year. So, we are going to see it there, but I'm hoping that once we get back to Europe, Bagnaia is going to find a bit more of his kind of inner Pecco-ness and be a bit closer to the front again. I think the only thing that's missing this weekend is kind of the fact that he's not Marc Marquez, and that Marc is just next level at certain circuits. And I think that made the difference. I know Alex was in between them as well, but I think in a straight race, without Marc doing the whole slowing it down thing and letting Alex lead that he did, I think Pecco would have been second in the main race on Sunday. I think he would have got the better of Alex over the course of a 2-horse race rather than one with Marc in the mix. So I think it's not a disaster for it. We kind of spoke about it in the press conference, and he was like, manage the situation for the next month until we get to, I had kind of said Jerez, but he says Liceo and Qatar, round 4 is kind of the first place where he can strike back. And it's a circuit where Marc is very quick, but it's also a circuit where Pecco has been very quick. Yeah. And I think like that kind of has to be his hope. He has to get through 3 rounds, concede no more than kind of, less than 10 points a weekend until then, and then try and do some winning once we go to circuits with fast-flowing corners that suit his style more.
Well, he has to beat Marc in Qatar, because the whole reason we're on a 10-year streak that just snapped of Marc never winning the opener is so much of it was Qatar, and he was getting beaten by Ducatis in various fashion. I think... I mean, I'm more worried than that, not in the sense that there's not going to be fights this season. I'm confident there will be fights at certain tracks. I'm confident there will be tracks where Bagnaia out-qualifies Marquez, even potentially by a lot. Like, I think maybe there will be early on Saturday where there's like half a second between them in qualifying trim, and that's just kind of normal. At some of the tracks that Marc doesn't like so much, Sepang is the one that really at the top of my head. But also, at the same time, you said the only issue that he's not Marc. That's fairly fundamental.
Yes.
Not sure.
Same thought.
Not sure there's like a surgery that's going to fix that. Yeah. So I think he will have been really worried by what he saw specifically in the way this race played out, because I don't think this was like a total gimme Marc track. I think he will have, in normal circumstances, this early into the season as teammates, and the fact that Pecco isn't really hopping a spec, Marc is, the fact that Pecco got a full preseason, whereas we expect Marc to have an advantage over everybody basically when you're coming into a track fresh. When you're starting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the grip keeps maybe ramping up, maybe it never arrives at its peak, and you don't have like the full 15 days of data from testing that you rely on. and we had an extra weekend this weekend, so everybody was super, super fast. But that's the kind of weekend where you'd want, ideally, Pecco Bagnaia to run with Marc, whatever track it is, with so much running, with so much data to crunch and to learn from. And yet he ended it not super comfortable, not super certain of where the sort of the lacking performance was. On Saturday, he talked about the fuel tank, the difference between the 12 liter and the 22 liter, and how he feels worse with the 12 liter. And you asked him a very good question, Simon. You asked him about whether he tried the 22 half filled, and whether that showed him he feels better with that. So it's just the fuel tank dimensions, and he said it is. But then also on Sunday, he just wasn't that strong compared to Marc. I mean, it was negligible. Normally, in a normal weekend, his Saturday to Sunday step is very noticeable because it goes from third place to a win. Today, there was a step, and it went from third place to third place. So,
yeah, it's not great, is it? I get the point that Marc has some certain specialty circuits, but like you say, this isn't like a top 3 one of those even. And if Pecco's waiting till kind of April before he thinks that he's going to be on more kind of even turf on that front, he's lost 14 points this weekend. If he's minimising it to like 10 points per weekend lost, he's 30 plus points behind after Kota if it continues like this. And that's a massive back foot to be on in a title fight against Marc Marquez when you're both on factory Ducatis. So I know Bagnaia looked and sounded kind of as okay as he can about this right now, but every weekend that is like this gets closer to proper crisis point for his standing within this team and his hopes for another title. And it does seem like he's got specific issues to solve. And like you say, when he said on Saturday about the fuel tank being the issue that's hampered him in sprints, it's like, okay, I feel more optimistic of him properly taking Marc on in the Grand Prix, but there just wasn't much of a sign of it at all. Kind of related question from Morris Henry, who asked, why did Pecco start the sprint on the hard tyre? Is that a sign of him struggling on corner entry in particular? Simon?
I don't think he really touched on it too much after the race. I imagine it is. Yeah, I'd imagine it's just trying to get a bit more stability going in. But I don't know if it's a sign of struggle or if it was also just maybe taking into consideration that today was super, super hot. Again, just to reinforce that, it was really hot. And I think a few people were kind of gambling harder just to kind of save it till the end a bit more.
Just checking my notes, and yeah, I think it is. I think it is the corner entry basically from what we've heard. And it, despite the extra support offered by the hard, he still went through it basically in the sprint anyway. So he clearly wasn't having the best weekend in terms of his usual braking strength. I mean, I think he was still getting it done in the usual hard braking places, but then he was apparently he was giving up a lot to Marc in the left-handers of 4, 5, 6, which and then apparently giving up time to Alex, who apparently was really good in the right-handers of 7, 8, I think, or must be 7, 8. Yeah. So just sort of wasn't, even though this track should play to certain strength, it wasn't enough this time. So.
As we've mentioned the temperatures, actually, Ben Johnson said super hot conditions on race day. In practical terms, what can actually be done to minimise the heat coming off the bikes without sacrificing performance? And Simon's basically shaking his head at that. I mean, you've been posting pictures of riders' burnt thighs today as well. It was pretty brutal, wasn't it? Yeah.
The weird thing has been that this is there's 2 issues at play here. There's one where the rider kind of overheats because their internal body temperature goes way through the roof, which used to be a huge Aprilia problem. And it sounds like they fixed that because Bezzecchi today was like, oh no, it's better than a Ducati, which is the sort of thing that Aleix Espargaro would have bitten your arm off to have heard 12 months ago, 3 months ago. Yeah. So that's a huge step. But the issue today actually seemed to be, it was the bike heating up so much that guys were getting contact burns from being pressed against it, tucked in against it. Jack Miller gave a really good explanation early on in the weekend about how, on the KTM, because this doesn't happen in the KTM because it's got a steel tubular frame that doesn't hold heat the same way as the aluminium of the Yamaha. But he says, every time you tuck your elbows in, it sort of went, and you had to put them out again because it was so hot. And he came in covered in burns. Zarco was covered in burns. Zarco said that the same thing happened to him in the Suzuki 8R on a Fireblade on a street bike, essentially a production bike, but it was because he rode it for 8 hours, not for 45 minutes. So, just all round huge temperatures from the amount of heat that these bikes are producing. But because of aerodynamics, you're permanently now trying to kind of close in the rider.
Yeah.
So there's not much place for the heat to go. You know, it's worth noting that if you go all the way back to pictures of the 2010 factory Ducati, it was the first ever bike we saw with wings. But the point of the wings on that bike were not downforce. They were to direct air into the fairing to try and cool down the engine.
Oh, yeah.
It was that was the first place we ever saw wings was for cooling, not for anything else. So it's permanently an issue. And you remember, like, Ducati used to be really bad for it in the very early days. You used to see those pictures of, like, Caparossi with the front fairing drilled full of holes to try and allow a bit of airflow through. But again, doesn't work for aerodynamics. GG won't allow that. So there's really not an awful lot you can do apart from make sure that your riders are as fit as they can be, and that you're kind of as prepared for it as you can be. I know a few of them do things like crazy stupid things like set up exercise bikes and saunas before they come here, and do, like, cycling sprint sessions at 40 degrees ambient air temperature just to try and cope with it, because it's all you can do.
I think the two guys all weekend who were like, oh, this is kind of fine, were, wouldn't you know it, Ai Ogura and Sonkia Chantra. And Ogura's theory was basically like, look, I've ridden in Asia in my career in these kind of conditions, so that might be it. That might be why I'm coping better with it. I presumably also has lived in those conditions, and definitely same for Sonkia Chantra, who is from here.
He lives 4 hours away.
Yeah. We had Rins band, Alex Rins had burns. We had Joan Mir crash potentially partly because the bike was burning him. Yeah. And we had Fabio Di Giannantonio retire from Saturday's race because the bike was burning him, and apparently... We
didn't hear from Raul Fernandez, but he retired from Sunday's race for the same thing.
Oh, okay. Wow, okay.
Yeah, and
burns for Zarco, burns for Miller. I'm just thinking, like, who was showing off like naked flesh in the media centre to make us feel sorry for them. It was one of those weird days.
Was Raul Burns? I thought it was. I think it was front tire going nuts.
I thought it was temperature, but maybe not. Maybe not Burns,
like temperature, but in the.
I thought it was rider temperature, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in any case, I think Di Giannantonio mentioned that they did something makeshift on the bike.
Yeah.
To alleviate it specifically for Sunday. I haven't had a look yet.
No, me neither. I got the impression that they'd, from the way he described it, kind of theatrically, I got the impression that they'd maybe wrapped some parts of the bike in gold foil.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. Yeah. So that might be the answer. just do that. Do home repair.
Well, this is it. On that topic, Annie said, is there any pressure to move races to times of the year or day when it's less blisteringly hot? But I think it's being left to the riders and teams to figure out how to cope, because these sort of calendar slots and these sort of temperatures aren't going anywhere, are they?
There is an element of, let's remember that this is not when we normally race here.
True.
And this time of the year is hotter, but we're here because we can't race in Qatar, because they're going into a major religious holiday, so we can't race there. The season is starting ridiculously, stupidly earlier than it ever has before. The last time the season started this early was 1964.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just stupid, stupidly hot here. Mainly because, when we come in the other later in the year, it's kind of moving out of the rainy season, whereas now it's the height of summer. It's just So hopefully we get a more normal calendar next year, and it largely solves the problem.
Yeah, it's part of the game. It also just kind of sucks, doesn't it? Like, it's not really. You don't feel like this is part of the reasonable challenge. You watch the Moto3 kids in the relative morning. I think it was even hotter.
I think it was even hotter.
It was like 37, 30. Yeah. And you watch like people start causing crashes, like really stupid crashes in the final laps of the race. Like Joel Kelso wiping out Angel Piqueras, etc. And you're like, I don't know that this doesn't do anything for me. This is like, it's an endurance, it's a gauntlet. Okay, fine, but like, it's not really. Not what I want, let's put it that way, even outside of the safety consideration.
Yeah.
And to what extent did the crazy temperatures influence how it became such a tyre pressure race at the front? Because there was a moment when I was thinking, are we going to see Marc do this a lot this season? Duncan Bertram said, will this be the story of every race, tyre pressure-wise, or was this just a particularly extreme example due to the temperatures, rather?
No, it was an extreme one. It was because of the temperatures here specifically, I'm pretty sure.
So the good news is Marc can just lead lights to flag at other places because he won't have to worry.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate pina colada and Thai iced coffee flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
You're the perfect blend of elegance and style, and your ride should be no different. The 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid meets all your needs, from business to brunch and everywhere in between. With head-turning details like a sleek front end, plus stylish interior, and an available 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster and seamless tech integration. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more about the new 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid.
Okay, on to what we're calling the Ai Ogura fan club section this week. In the Race Members Club, like I say, we've invited everyone there in the community section to make their own Larry predictions. And there was a flurry before practice even started of people making Ai Ogura predictions around him getting on the podium and around him winning the teammate battle at Trackhouse. Alex AG, Eric Yip and LeFou all said variations on that. Well, he didn't quite get a podium, but you were all nearly right straight away with Ogura right up behind Bagnaia through the sprint. Incidentally, if you're not in the members club yet, there's 90% off your first month if you join now. If you're in there already and you didn't spot my call out for Larry predictions, please do make some of your own at any point this season in the community section. I'm keeping track of all of them. We'll drop them in the podcast, and at some point we'll just assess a load in a members special. You are actually Larryer than us. Within literally the first 20 minutes of me doing that call out on, I think it was Thursday, I was like, okay, we're pretty unadventurous with our predictions sometimes. I was very impressed. But let's get on to Ai Ogura, absolute hero of the weekend, I would say. You know, we knew he was good, but to come in and come so close to beating Bagnaia to third in the sprint, and then a very competitive Grand Prix as well. Simon, you, in our work chat early in the race on Saturday, predicted he wouldn't keep this up. There would be a mistake, like we've seen from so many rookies in their first race, whether burning up the tyres after starring or leading, then throwing it down the road. None of that. He was awesome.
I mean, it's kind of the rookie thing, isn't it? It's what rookies do in MotoGP. They're really, really fast, but a bit crashy. And he wasn't. He was just solid. He has been just super impressive this weekend. The whole paddock is talking about him, about the performances he's delivered. And yet you go and speak to the team, and the team are like, yeah, he's still not happy. He's still moaning that things aren't like, that he's not quick enough. He's become this like real star off the bike as well, because he's so dry that he's accidentally hilariously funny. So whenever he's describing things with his very dry tone, it's just it's comedic. Someone asked him on Saturday what his ambitions were for the season, and without him intending it to be so funny, he said, "I don't know this word ambition." And he wasn't being arrogant. He just didn't understand the word. And then they said goals. And he was like, oh, my goals for the...
Oh, brilliant.
But he keeps doing this. He keeps like saying, oh, yeah, I'm not fast enough in time attack mode. And we're like, you made it straight to Q2 and you're as a rookie. And he's like, yeah, but I made like 4 mistakes. I could have been faster. And the team are just like... The team are amazed. They've never worked with anyone that's kind of this meticulous in their you know, how they go about things. And are just in love with him, and so are Aprilia by the sounds of things. Marco Bezzecchi was praising him today, praising kind of the quality of the feedback that the factory team is already getting from him, things like that. They have unearthed an absolute superstar.
Remember all the concerns we've understandably had over Trackhouse betting itself into MotoGP, and specifically what we've talked about in the off season. And a lot of that still applies, but it kind of feels like it doesn't matter when you have a guy like this. It's just what a singular rider presence can change. I don't know how to. I probably shouldn't say this because it just probably exposes my lack of knowledge / long-term memory. I can't think of a better MotoGP debut than this. That was insane.
I mean, there's been other really good ones.
Yes.
But they normally end up in the gravel trap.
Yes.
I mean, Johan Zarco.
Yes.
You know, the leading half his first race and then crashing, which is arguably both better and worse as a debut, but as impressive.
Pedro Acosta made such an impression this time last year, but also then went backwards because he wrecked the tyres while making it. So yeah, this was sensational.
I mean, just the funny thing about it is you look at the Sunday results and just imagine for a second, Ai Ogura didn't get signed. They signed somebody else. Let's say that somebody isn't there, injured, whatever, etc. The bike isn't competing. The difference between the lead Ducati and the lead next best of the rest bike is 15 seconds. You put Ai in there, it's 7.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? In your first weekend? Are you joking? You're holding up the rest of the grid in your first weekend? What is this absolute nonsense?
Well, this is key, I think, because a lot of the praise you could see it through the weekend in the comments we were getting from the members club. Initially, it was like, wow, this guy's going really well, and then it was almost all of it was in the context of how he compared to the other Aprilia riders. So let's go through them because it's the one who's not here and how he might compare to that one that I think is the really interesting bit. But as Duncan Bertram put it, how did Ogura have such a margin to Bezzecchi when Bez went so well in testing? Was it a simple pace advantage or was Bez struggling with tyres or something? And actually Todd Bryant phrased it is thinking about testing as well. Is I this good or is it just because of all the testing on the circuit? So comparison to Bez, what was that about this weekend, Simon?
I mean, his sprint race is completely compromised by rear tyre off the line. He had a huge slide, dirty grid spot, back and forth, and then had just one of those races, I think, where his rear tyre was a bit compromised because of it, and he struggled to basically do anything. His main race was much better, and he was much more content with it. But again, he kind of got bogged down a bit early on, got stuck behind people that took a long time to get past, and it was just mainly one of those races rather than a complete disaster of a weekend for him. There was so much more potential.
Yeah, he crashed in qualifying, and that was a big part of it. Obviously, also the sprint is undone by the start, but the qualifying crash was a considerable problem. But look, even if like Bezzecchi gets a clean weekend, are we confident he beats Ogura this weekend?
No,
I'm not like super confident. Let me put it that way. I think the heat genuinely will have been part of it. Like that must be at least a role. I think the testing for sure, 100% will have been part of it. I mean, the extra 2 days are more valuable to him than anyone. But there's a non-zero chance, and I'd say the chance is pretty high that he's just a stud. So there's that. He's just awesome. He's just very good at riding a motorcycle. Look, we need more data to fall back on. I think I've been writing a lot about Ai this weekend for an obvious reason because he's the most interesting and important storyline in a way, and I'm find myself writing like almost sometimes feeling differently, having like either saying the same thing in different ways or sometimes saying completely different, maybe even contradictory things. But sometimes it's just not that complicated, is it? The guy who's been good before MotoGP is good in MotoGP. The scale of the goodness surprised us this weekend, but ultimately, yeah, he's good. He was always good. Like even when he was choking away championships, you got to be fast to choke away a championship because you got to put yourself in a position to do that in the first place. He's awesome. That's all I got.
If you're newish to Ogura, have a look on the race website for Val's column, Ai Ogura, what his star-making MotoGP debut really shows, because we go into some of the, not quite controversies, but this is a guy who some people thought shouldn't be on the bike because Joe Roberts should be on it. This is a guy who blew a Moto2 title. This is a guy who turned a Honda MotoGP ride down somewhat boldly at a time when people didn't do that despite how bad Honda was, and he's here and he's starring. So yeah, look at the website for a bit more on Ogura. For the members club as well, if you haven't seen that in there yet, Simon did a little reaction video on Saturday straight after the sprint race, just sharing some of the paddock takes on how Ogura's doing. Ralph Fernandez on the other Trackhouse Aprilia. So a convoluted route to this, but in the members club halfway through the sprint on Saturday, Reece Charles wrote, "Why is Franco Morbidelli here?" Grand Prix was all right though, wasn't it, Reece? So actually, the Wise Bobby Daly here chat can wait a few weeks because actually Grand Prix quite decent. Cardiff Giant replied to Reece to say you could say the same for Raul Fernandez. We've talked a bit about how Ogura coming in and doing well would be terrible for Raul Fernandez. It looks terrible for Raul Fernandez already. Val, what's your take on Raul's weekend?
Look, I don't like the idea of using the emergence of a star to knock others in a way. I know this is a comparison game and a relative game, and that's part of it certainly. And I think it is important to consider the ramifications for Raul Fernandez of getting stomped on by a rookie in his debut weekend, but maybe not to the extent like, oh, it shows that he shouldn't be here, etc. I think that's a bit. I don't feel that way. However, he was. Let's remember that his preseason got pretty badly compromised because of the crash, and that's gonna be a contributing factor. I think he was at his best, reasonably pacey during the weekend. You looked on Sunday, and at the start of the race, he was running up there. On Saturday, he should have had a normal sprint, but blew it at turn 3, basically under braking, lost positions, then he can't recover him in a sprint. He's not hopeless. It's just that for Raul Fernandez, we're still this is year 4. We're waiting for him to put together a clean weekend, a really good, really clean weekend, start to finish. Yeah. His teammates come in, done it first try. Of course, it's going to look bad.
Yeah. This is the thing. That is the thing for me. That's why it is an okay this is specifically an okay comparison situation, because Ogura is a new star coming in and hitting it straight away, and everyone's going, wow, look what he can do straight away. Raul Fernandez was a new star 3 years ago, and let's see what he can do. He keeps getting postponed and postponed and postponed because there's an injury, because the team's not great, because of circumstances. It's year 4. I don't think Raul Fernandez is any slower than Ai Ogura, but I think already Ai Ogura has come in and shown how fast he is and that he can execute it across a whole weekend in his first MotoGP weekend. And that's what you just, like you say, Val, we haven't seen that actually properly once to that extent from Raul Fernandez. And it's really sad because the speed is certainly there. I said we compare Ai Ogura to the guy you can't compare him to as well. Jorge Martin was obviously not here. Alexander Law said, looking at how both I and Bez this weekend, and with all the caveats of Bury Ram and familiarity, should we have more confidence in Aprilia this year being more competitive, especially if Martin comes back before May? Now, this is it for me. When every time Ogura was flying over this weekend, I was thinking, what could Martin be doing on that bike? And having massive optimism for Martin. I'm gonna go Larry, getting among the works Ducatis. Simon,
there was genuine.
No, he winced at me there.
No, I didn't. No. There was a point. There was a point on Saturday morning when there was three Aprilias in Q2, and I was thinking, my God, I wish Mr. Qualifying was here to see what he could do on that.
Yeah,
Jorge Martin could have been in the front row.
Yeah.
Easy. And it's going to take a bit of time before he's fully confident to do the whole Jorge Martin thing and push in time attack mode. But in an era where qualifying is so key to MotoGP, Jorge Martin is going to disrupt this year on that bike more than I thought, because it turns out it's really good in time attack.
Yeah.
I want to see a range of tracks. That's important for me, because this, on face value, this is supposed to be terrible for Aprilia. This is supposed to be a terrible place for the bike. There is I think a possibility that the bike's more rounded across, so it's shaved off some of its really weaker parts, so weaker tracks, but that also nerfs it a little bit in the stronger parts, which is basically what happened with the 2024 version of the bike last year, and this is an evolution of that, so you would expect that to continue to a certain degree. That said, I think so far, on the evidence that we have, the bike's awesome. Just looks really good. The fact is also it's supposed to be a pretty complicated bike, and it's clearly maybe a little easier now. That's what Lorenzo Savadori, the test rider who's riding in relief of Jorge Martin, I think he kept saying it over and over during the weekend, kept emphasizing how happy he is that Ogura is doing well, also because that shows the bike's more adaptable now, that you can click with it quicker, and he seemed to take a real major source of pride in that. I'm super impressed. Whatever happens with Aprilia from here, I know that the results, the performance usually goes inverse proportional to the number of the round, right? So maybe if they put Thailand on round 17, maybe Thailand was bad because it was always late in the season and the equipment was all holes and stuff. But
it's a stop-start sort of circuit.
Yeah, not somewhere that they expected to do this.
Yeah, a stop-start circuit in really hot temperatures. That is not Aprilia turf, is it?
I think they've done mega. I'm super happy for them. Good job. Fantastic.
Yeah. A team that needed it as well after to get like half an hour, not half an hour, it's an exaggeration, Matt, a couple of hours into the first test and two of your riders are basically in hospital. It's like, Aprilia. And then to have a weekend, okay, the results aren't there apart from Ai, and it could have been so much better with Martin there as well, or Bez string the weekend together. But yeah, a lot of encouragement. And again, it's not really about winning a title, it's about showing that you can win the title in the future. We did think KTM might be vying with Aprilia to be the second best bike at Buriram after testing. Grim weekend for KTM. Acosta fast at times, crashes out of the main race. And yeah, Bastianini, we'll talk about in a minute because that was nuts. But Dimitri Schenk says, what happened to Acosta? Is he turning out to be a bit crash prone combined with last season? Or is the KTM just not where it should be and he was overriding a bit? I'm wondering if Acosta's typical early turn-in and tight corner entry is more risky and resulting in more crashes. So Val, Acosta gave quite a bit of insight into his thinking behind why he crashed out of the race in his debrief. How did he describe it?
Yeah, his description is basically that this year with the bike, it's a lot easier to unload the rear, and that caused him to went wide. He slid, the bike regripped, the front went. So, normal crash, but it's apparently a characteristic of the bike. And just on a more general note, there has been a mention that sort of the way Acosta prefers to ride doesn't seem to totally click with this bike right now necessarily, or at least it's hard to say because the feedback does seem to be changing quite a lot from day to day in terms of how happy they are with where they're at and what the characteristic is. And it's like it like feels a personal failing on my part that I'm really struggling to form a full picture of the exact mechanical issue. But I can speak in a wider sense. Basically, he feels they're lacking an understanding of the bike, despite all the preseason running and all the stuff they did. Maybe because of the way they approach testing, potentially. Because they spent testing trying components and maybe were later than the others in putting the package together. That's sort of a KTM thing. And maybe that's where the understanding is lacking. He also mentioned that the tire life doesn't look so great, which I think does not surprise us massively, given those pictures from testing of the rear tire getting torn up to shreds on the KTMs. He said the pace was good after the crash relative to the leaders, and I have not had a look, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was too good. I don't think it was meaningfully slow this weekend. I think he just wasn't fast enough to avoid the melee, and I don't like that for KTM at Buriram, because when are you going to be good then? No. If you're not meaningfully good here.
It felt like a weak weekend for them. It felt quite ominous, like there was something fundamentally missing. And it's kind of I don't want to link it to the whole financial thing that's going on, because I don't think that's what it is. But it kind of felt like the first weekend where they've been impacted by all the stuff that's going on at home, because they had such a positive testing program where everything, went fairly well, despite the fact that they were, quite quiet in what they said and didn't put everything together until the end and didn't bother speaking to the media at the final test or anything. It still felt like it was all okay, and then kind of the wheels fell off a bit this weekend.
Yeah, I agree, and it's that is the feedback. That's also part of my confusion over feedback, because there were positive noises over the bike becoming safer, so allowing you to bring the result home while taking fewer risks. Maybe you don't know about the upper bound of performance potential, whatever, that comes later, but just the bike allowing guys like Acosta and guys like Brad Binder to access the performance in a simpler way, while not sort of leaving so many zeros. And first weekend, and suddenly the bike doesn't work with the riding style that Acosta wants to use. And when he tries to use it, the rear unloads and the bike goes, and there's a zero on the standings. I didn't like it. I thought it's quite worrying also. And I didn't even think about the financial situation, because I don't know that all right, I shouldn't say this, I guess, but whatever. I don't know that I believe in KTM development-wise.
Regardless of the...
Yeah. It's been a while, that we've been in this range of performance. Hasn't it?
Yeah, well,
like since 2020, basically.
Yeah, it does. It feels quite stagnant.
Yeah, I mean the grid positions are not like crazy for KTM generally in recent history. Acosta qualifying 6th, Brad Binder doesn't have great qualifying 14th, maybe a bit lower than usual for Binder, sort of salvages a top 10 in the race. Some Tech 3 riders start 80th and 20th, but the difference is those Tech 3 riders aren't Remy Gardner and Raul Fernandez now. It's we're in the territory where Tech 3 signing Maverick Vinales and Nea Bastianini. They had a bad test, the Tech 3 pair, and during the sprint, Johnny W. wrote in the Members Club, why is it going so wrong for the Tech 3 riders? Before we look at that, then Nea Bastianini, genuinely, I was kind of focused on what was going on at the front and the Marquez brothers thing. I looked at the timing screen with like 2 laps to go, I was like, what? How is Bastianini at that point 8th? Where has that come from? I know it's the end of a hot race and you expect some tyre wizardry from Bastianini, but sorry, Nea, having been rubbish lap time wise and confused about the bike and hating the bike, saying it was like a 1 out of 10 for him, he comes through the field to 8th in the race. As Dan Neal put it, how did Bastianini come back from such a terrible Saturday to finish a couple of tenths behind Binder? I think you both waved your hands at me at different points during my rant there. Who wants to go first?
Just before we get to Enea, because I don't actually have that much to say about Enea other than great job, well done. I'm so happy for you after this weekend. But before that, Matt, you mentioned that the grid positions were in line generally with what you come to expect from KTM, right?
Yeah, ish.
But KTM isn't Crystal Palace. KTM isn't Brentford. KTM's goal isn't to avoid relegation or whatever. We're here to win a championship, right?
True.
You don't win championships qualifying 6th, 12th, whatever.
KTM are Man City.
Well, if they're Man City, then where's the titles or the allegations of financial impropriety?
Well, I mean...
okay, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
And Bastianini's like entire thing, it's been quite funny. He's been so miserable all weekend. He's been so down the dumps, which is really not like him. And it's been quite endearing because it's not like him. He's been really miserable. And then he came in after the race, he sat down and he was just like, guess what? I can still do that thing that I do where I go really fast at the end of races. I could do that any bike. And was all chuffed with himself, all pleased. So he's just putting it down to basically natural talent because he's so good at it. And you know what? There has to be an element of that. Yeah. There has to be just an element of it was super hot today. Tires were getting a bit mashed up, and he's the tire whisperer.
So it's almost like everyone else slowed down to his level or below his level in like the final third of the race, but he didn't get more comfortable with the actual KTM.
He just didn't slow down. He's just.
Well, he can't exploit the fresh tire mid corner. Basically, is what he's saying. But when the tire gets shredded and the heat and the temperature and everything goes out a window, then suddenly, Bastianini is enough in control of himself over race distance, because he said he started the race aggressively and was like messing up like he was doing all weekend, blowing braking points, etc. And then tweaked the bike a little bit just to rein himself in, and worked. And it was fantastic. It looked great. I'm really happy for him because it looked so bad. It looked so bad coming out of testing. It looked so bad on Friday. It looked horrific on Saturday. And then the Enea Bastianini experience is back. And I like the Enea Bastianini experience. Makes me smile.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Pepcid Complete knows that food is one of the best parts of game day. That is, until heartburn strikes. Thankfully, just one chewable tablet of Pepcid Complete provides dual-action heartburn relief with an antacid that starts working instantly and an acid reducer that lasts all day. So you can stay focused on that second helping of chili without worrying about heartburn. All day based on 8-hour symptom relief studies during the day. Use product only as directed.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Before we get on to Honda versus Yamaha section, which sadly for those two is still at the end of the episode, a quick announcement for the Members Club, and that's if you're in there or not yet in there. 2015 revisited. Now we've got testing and the opener out of the way in 2025. We'll go to a regular schedule for our mini pods rerunning the entire 2015 season with us three and Megan. So this is something for you to memorize so you know when the episodes are coming up. Every time there's not a MotoGP race in 2025, on the Friday of that weekend, we'll do a 2015 race. So you can stick that in your podcast listening diary if you're in the Members Club. Let's get back to Honda and Yamaha's 2025. Both Honda and Yamaha had their moments of looking quite decent during this weekend. Also some really painful bits. Joan Mir back to the crashing habit. Fabio Quartararo results-wise had a pretty horrible weekend. Standout of the quartet in terms of the two teams in terms of actual raw pace. Simon, it was Jack Miller, very fast in his first weekend on the Pramac Yamaha before crashing out of one race and going backwards in the other. So it was the entire Jack Miller experience, wasn't it, in one weekend, but with a real high point of how fast he was as well.
He was fast, but there are a couple of caveats to it. Fabio Quartararo's take on why he was so fast is that Jack disconnected his brain for qualifying and gave a fantastic explanation of how he thinks Jack's mind operates, which was highly amusing.
Do you need to have a look at what Jack was doing?
Yeah,
we need a little bit more.
We checked. I mean, especially he disconnect it a little bit more the brain than us. We check. He was behind Pecco, and of course there is a little bit of slipstream, but I think the turn 4 is, like I said, the brain was totally switched off, and big amount of the lap time is there. And he was very, very fast, and is something that I really like to have someone like Jack that pushed the bike to the extra limit.
Jack's counter was that, doesn't everyone do that? Doesn't everyone switch off their brains all the time? And that may go away to explaining the Jack Miller experience, but that's another subject. I think the actual reason why Jack was so fast and qualified is because he also did both his time attack runs glued to Pecco Bagnaia's rear wheel and got a massive toe off him, which was quite beneficial, let's be honest, and probably made the difference between him and Quartararo. And then in the race, he did peak Jack Miller falling off from a good position in the sprint and then just fading backwards in the main race. And actually, looking at his performances in specific and the whole Yamaha thing as a whole, it was a pretty disappointing weekend for them. But it's a weird one because it was only a disappointing weekend for them because of how good the test was here. If we'd not tested here and they'd come and had this weekend, you'd be like, yeah, that's pretty much where Yamaha's at this circuit, because this circuit isn't particularly Yamaha friendly. And I think that's what we saw. We saw the reality of, oh yeah, the bike has got a lot better. The bike is really much faster now on one lap time attack mode, but guess what? It still struggles when you have to race it in a pack and try and overtake people with it. And they paid the price for that with just, rather bang average results in both the sprint and the main race for pretty much the whole of the quartet.
I think for me the big reason why Yamaha really didn't impress was that Quartararo just had a shocker, generally speaking, and when Quartararo has a shocker, Yamaha is going to follow by and large. I think I don't want to crucify Miller for even having the usual Miller weekend because it is his first time on the Yamaha, and apparently his fairing was like coming loose during the Sunday race. I think that's a reasonable enough excuse for the usual loss of pace, but I think just the lack of experience on the bike is a more reasonable excuse than anything. If he's doing the same stuff in 6 months' time, which might very well be, then I'll be harsher. But I left this weekend with a pretty positive impression of how his life on the Yamaha started. I don't think he was the pace standout of the Honda Yamaha group. I think that's Joan Mir. I think Joan Mir was the quickest of the 8. I know he crashed in the end, so I don't know how much that matters. But Joan Mir was just super fast,
100%.
And for me, the question is, this opener is slightly a lie, right? Because of the test. And because of the extra 2 days, we're going to have a better picture soon at some more conventional tracks, not even necessarily Argentina, of what these manufacturers look like when they have old data to lean on, but they don't have earlier running on these bikes. So what they do through Friday, what they do through Saturday, that kind of stuff, how their pace changes over a weekend. I've heard Luca Marini theorize that Honda should actually be okay, like stronger when there's less data, because their electronics work out of the box before running is so good. I want to see if that's true. I think the track this time favored Honda, but I was still genuinely caught a little off guard by just how reasonably fast Joan Mir was when he crashed. And he crashed because, again, as we mentioned, the bike seemingly was burning him, but also because he's Joan Mir. But like, he was going for a top 6. That would have been a top 6 finish, and it would have been pretty close to being on merit, I would say. I'm curious. I guess that was the point of that long-winded narration from my part, is I am curious as to what's going on there.
I had a really good chat last night with Joan Mir's manager, actually. I bumped into Paco Sanchez in the paddock, and we had a kind of good chat about what they were feeling. And then, I heard Joan today, and I genuinely, I'm like, this is as confident as I've heard him sounding since he was wearing blue and riding a Suzuki. He said after the race, he said straight up, I know I crashed and it was probably at least partly my mistake and I need to not do that. But this was a bike that was capable of fighting in the second group, in the kind of the group behind the Ducatis. He felt like he had a bike to be in that pack, and he feels like he has a bike that can continue to be in that pack for at least a part of this season, at least on and off through this season. And then he straight up said, I've never said that to you before. I've never told you guys before that the bike is this good. And it just sounds optimistic for the first time in so long. It sounds like there might actually be a bit of a glimmer of hope. It's exactly the same noises that we were hearing from Yamaha kind of in Sepang at the test, whenever they also realized that they had a bike that at certain points in this coming season will be capable of being in the same place again. And it's not race wins, it's not fighting for a championship, but man, it's better than where they were last year.
Yeah, I'm guessing I'm trying to think of what you would expect going forward in those more conventional race weekends, because there's arguments for and arguments against, and I think there's also arguments to say that Honda has taken a big step forward, right? I think Luca Marini estimated it 0.4,
0.4 of a second.
Yeah. Which again depends on what Ducati you take as reference, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. But for me, the question is how much of the improvement is also unlocking more Joan Mir? Because kind of Johan Zarco is sort of in the same place he was before, isn't he?
Yeah.
But it also might be him being less comfortable with a better bike. So it's an interesting puzzle to unpick going forward, I think.
I'm fairly sure that Mir feels like a rider who's lacking in confidence, and probably rightly so at the minute. And I think if he starts feeling a bit of love from the bike and a bit of confidence in the bike, he's going to surprise this year. I'm genuinely and don't think it's massive hyperbole or a really leery prediction to say, maybe we can see him fight for podiums. Or no, that's not the right way of phrasing it. Not podiums, but a podium here and there before this year is out. If this form continues, because there'll be races, especially, he's pretty good in the wet. There's races that'll suit them, places where it's a bit colder, things like Motegi, where it wouldn't be impossible to see him touching in the top 3 again.
Maybe. I mean, if the Aprilia is also good at these tracks now, then I don't know. But
no, I know that too. And it's probably going to take bad luck for other people, which is why I'm not saying it's going to be, every weekend or 4 or 5 weekends or a series of them. But on and off, I wouldn't be shocked.
I should also I think this is an important caveat every time. The story that goes, the Honda looks pretty good in the first weekend and sucks for the rest of the season, just sucks nonstop, we've seen that. So, I don't know. I'm still not, I'm not super, super optimistic. I liked what I saw. And yeah, so did you.
Yeah, so maybe not podium tomorrow sort of, pace from Honda just yet. But even with Mir falling off, Zarco's result was only 0.3 off a top 6 place in the end, and Miller qualifying 4th on the Yamaha. You couldn't have towed a Yamaha to 4th on the grid with an aeroplane not so long ago. So, there's promise there. There's stuff to be optimistic about. We'll leave Thailand 2025 there. Me and Simon will be back next week. We'll give Val a little break between F1 and MotoGP Grand Prix, but you can hear Val, me, Simon and Megan in the next 2015 revisited episode from Jerez this coming Friday in the Members Club. Thank you, Members Club, for the absolute deluge of questions. We got through a fair few, but I'm keeping a rolling tally of others to attack in special episodes later in the year as well. We'll be back in your ears next week, by which time Simon will have remembered what his actual house looks like.
The Athletic.